Alright, so today we're going to talk about writing a good introduction for your critical conversation essay. Now, good introductions will grab the reader's attention, and one of the best ways to do that is with pathos. We've already talked about pathos. Pathos means saying something that makes your audience connect emotionally to what you're talking about. Another thing you want to do is give background information about your topic. And then finally, you'll want to end with a thesis statement. So, to grab your reader's attention right away, which is what an introduction is supposed to do, you want to use pathos. Pathos can be a personal anecdote, so that means you have an actual personal story related to your topic. And we'll look at some examples in a second. Examples that are real or hypothetical. So a real example means you know of a person that this happened to, and you can tell that person's story. Or hypothetical means maybe you don't have a specific example that you know really happened, but you can give an example that could happen to let the audience understand the significance of your topic. So let's look at a few examples so that you start to understand what the difference is between these different types of pathos-based stories that you could open your essay with. So this first one is a personal anecdote. In a personal anecdote, you'll use I because you're telling your story. So here's an example. I was sitting with my family at an Outback Steakhouse a few months ago, celebrating my brother's birthday. We were enjoying the wine, the bloomin' onion, and each other's company. Just as we were biting into our steaks, we caught a whiff of the smoke coming from a table in the nearby smoking section. Before we knew it, our eyes were watering and we were coughing. Every bite of food was tainted by the smell of cigarette smoke. The meal was ruined. It's times like these that make me wonder why South Carolina doesn't implement smoking bans in public places. So this is a personal anecdote because, as you can see, it uses I was sitting, we were enjoying. And this is an actual story that happened to this student. So he wants to tell his story because his topic is about smoking bans. And so he wants to tell his story about why he thinks there should be smoking bans in restaurants in South Carolina. So to make us understand the significance of that topic, of why we should care about it, he's going to tell us this personal story about how he was affected by a lack of smoking bans. So personal anecdote just means you have some kind of personal story in relation to your topic that you can tell to the audience in the beginning of your essay so that we understand the significance of your topic and we understand that you have a personal connection to it. Here's another personal anecdote. How am I going to afford next year's tuition? This is the question I ask myself every year because every year tuition costs rise, not to mention the costs of books, groceries, an apartment near campus, car payments, and gas money to get me to and from my job, which pays for my classes, and 100 other little expenses that come with going to college. With all the costs adding up, why aren't colleges doing more to keep tuition fees down so students like me don't have to worry about having to drop out or get a second job to cover the rising price of getting an education? So this is a personal anecdote because, again, it uses I, and it's the student telling a story about how college tuition costs too much and that this is a hardship for a lot of students, including the writer of this essay. So the writer is saying, this topic is important, and I know because I have personal experience with it. So let's look at the example option. So this first one is a real example. In California last year, a 14-year-old boy shot and killed a classmate he had a dispute with. The year before that, a 15-year-old in Wisconsin shot and killed his principal. 10 years ago, 2 boys went into Columbine High School and killed 13 people before shooting themselves. Every year there are more school shootings, and if we don't act now by installing metal detectors and having more police officers at every high school campus, They will undoubtedly continue. So this topic is about school shootings, and rather than use a personal example, because not that many people have personal examples for this student is using a real example. So they're saying, let me look at examples that have happened in the past years with school shootings, and I want to tell the audience about those examples so that they understand the importance of this, so that they can see how often this happens and how it affects people, so that they understand that this is not something that's an isolated incident. This is something that happens regularly, and this is something that is affecting our schools and our students a lot. So these are all real examples. These are not made up. These are straight from the newspaper kind of examples. So this is one option. If you're doing your research, finding real examples of how your topic has affected people so that you can put that in your introduction and make people understand why they should care about your topic. So this is another option in addition to the personal anecdote. Now, if you don't do a personal anecdote or a real example, you can do a hypothetical example. And hypothetical means it didn't necessarily happen, but it could happen. So we're just going to make up a scenario, but we're not making up a scenario that's ridiculous. We're making up one that is very likely to try and make the reader understand how this topic is important and why they should care. So here's our hypothetical example. Imagine yourself after you've graduated from college. You're working a good job in a big corporation, making enough money to buy a house and live comfortably, and can finally relax and enjoy your accomplishments. Now imagine all of it is taken away, so the rich CEOs of the company you work for can make an extra $1 million a year. Your house, your money, and your job are all taken away from you, and someone less qualified is hired in a third world country to do your job for 10% of your salary. This is what happens with outsourcing. American jobs are sent overseas, and unqualified foreign workers are exploited. The only ones who benefit are wealthy business executives. Outsourcing is hurting America, and the government needs to raise taxes on businesses who use this shameful practice. So again, it's introducing the topic, which is outsourcing, which means taking jobs from, and this is about America, taking jobs from America and sending them to other countries where work is cheaper. So this particular essay is going to try and connect emotionally with the audience and make them upset by saying, imagine this happened to you. So hypotheticals often use this format, this imagine yourself in this situation, and that's a way for them to, for the writer to get across the importance of the topic. So the best introductions are going to introduce the topic using pathos, and often end with a clear specific thesis statement. So we saw several thesis statements. Outsourcing is hurting America, and the government needs to raise taxes on businesses who use this shameful practice is a thesis statement. Every year there are more school shootings, and if we don't act now by installing metal detectors and having more police officers at every high school campus, they will undoubtedly continue. That's a thesis statement as well. And then why aren't more colleges doing things to keep tuition fees down so students don't have to drop out or get a second job to cover the rising price of getting an education? So these are all examples of here is the problem that needs to be fixed. So now we're going to take a look at that sample paper and how it starts in its introduction. So here it says imagine you. So what kind of opening are we using? We're using that hypothetical example. Imagine you are arrested for murdering a family in their own home. The only evidence against you is a witness, an acquaintance of yours, who has confessed to the crime and claimed you helped him with the murders. You proclaim your innocence, but in a whirlwind trial, you are convicted and sentenced to be executed. Later on, this witness changes his story and tries to tell people you're innocent and he committed the crime alone, but no one will listen. You sit in prison on death row for years. Finally, a lawyer hears your story and helps you prove your innocence. You step outside as a free man for the first time in 18 years. So this sounds like the hypothetical. It's in that same format, but this one actually now we're going to turn it around and show that it's a real example. This might sound like a fictional story that could never really happen, but this is actually the true story of Anthony Graves, who was convicted of murder when he was 27 years old and wasn't released until he was 45 years old. He lost nearly 2 decades off his life being locked up, and he's not alone. An average of 5 people a year are released from death row after being found innocent of the charges against them. And those are just the people who succeed in proving their cases. For every man who is released, we can assume some are still sitting in prison, or worse, have already been executed. Because this is a matter of life and death, we must carefully analyze our use of the death penalty in the U.S. to ensure no more innocent people are wrongfully put to death. So this one actually combines 2 of the strategies we talked about. It starts out with that hypothetical, that imagine this happens to you, but then it actually tells you this hypothetical is a true story that happened to someone. So this is both a hypothetical example and a real example at the same time. And this is another strategy that you can use. So now let's talk about background information. So after you've got your pathos-based story, then you want to include some background information. So background information is going to define and explain the issue. So whatever your topic is, you want to explain things like what are the first events related to this topic. So you want to look at like when did this become a problem, what kinds of things happen to make it a problem. Look at historical examples of people arguing over this issue. And you can name some of those people or organizations. Who's arguing about this and why? Why is this issue still a problem today? So those are the questions that you want to look at. You want to first draw your audience in by giving them that pathos-based story that gets their attention. And then you want to keep their attention by saying, here's why this is important beyond just on a more personal, emotional level, but on a historical level. Why was this a problem and why is it still a problem? So some good sources for this are CQ Researcher and encyclopedia articles on encyclopedia.com. So as you're looking for background information, make good use of those 2 sources and any other sources you want to include. And see the sample critical conversation paper for help. So let's go back to that one and look at how it uses background information. So we had our pathos-based story. We ended with our thesis here, which is what's highlighted in green. Because this is a matter of life and death, we must carefully analyze our use of the death penalty in the U.S. to ensure no more innocent people are wrongfully put to death. So we end with our thesis statement, and then we get into our background. The death penalty was first used in America in 1608 and was widely supported as an acceptable means of punishment. In 1790, laws were officially enacted that made the crimes of, quote, robbery, rape, murder, and forgery punishable by death. So it's telling us here's when it first became an issue. This is when the death penalty first started being used in America. A nationwide moratorium on the death penalty began in 1967 after the landmark case of Furman versus Georgia, where a burglar who accidentally killed the owner of the house he burglarized while trying to escape was sentenced to death. Moratorium, by the way, means a voluntary cease of using it. So a moratorium on the death penalty means that the country said, okay, we're not going to use this anymore. We're not going to say it's illegal. We're just going to voluntarily stop using it for a while. So notice it gives a specific court case. So when I say specific historical examples, that's what I mean. Is here we've got dates. It's your logos, your historical logos. We've got dates of when things happen. We've got a specific court case. And now to this sentence. For 9 years, the Supreme Court debated about whether or not executions violated the U.S. Constitution. Over this time, many states changed their laws about when the death penalty could and could not be used, making intentional murder the only crime that could result in a sentence of execution. Taking these changes into consideration, the Supreme Court finally voted to allow each state to decide whether or not it wanted to use the death penalty. So this whole paragraph is just a brief history of the death penalty. When was it first used in America? When did the laws become even more specific? When did people start arguing about it? What was the result of some of those arguments? That sort of thing. And now our next paragraph. The death penalty is still an issue because of cases like Anthony Graves, who we mentioned above in our real example, remember? So Anthony Graves was the one that this actually happened to. He went to jail when he was 27, didn't get out till he was 45. So we're going back to, this is still an issue because of cases like Anthony Graves and like Troy Davis, who was executed in Georgia last year after spending 22 years on death row for killing a police officer. There was no physical evidence linking Davis to the crime, and nearly all the witnesses who testified against him significantly changed their stories or admitted they had been wrong about seeing Davis commit the crime. Up until the moment of his death, Davis still proclaimed his innocence. So this is taking a very specific example and saying, here's why this is still a problem. So this is something you can do. You can find a more current example or court case or something that exemplifies why this topic is something people are still arguing about. This illustrates one of the main reasons people are against the death penalty. Innocent people can be unjustly put to death. All right, so we've looked at our pathos-based story. We've looked at our background information. Now, finally, we're going to look at our first viewpoint that's being talked about. And so we're specifically naming what is that viewpoint? Well, it's the viewpoint that innocent people can be put to death. Many experts have discussed this issue. One such expert is Dr. James Rumond, who has a PhD in criminology and is the author of The Death Penalty Question. In his book, Dr. Rumond discusses this problem by giving examples of all the people who were wrongfully imprisoned and were almost executed. Over 70 people have been found innocent and released from death row since 1976. Many of these men served 20 years or more, with the threat of death looming over them before being exonerated. With all of these men who were originally sentenced to death being found innocent, it seems very likely that America has executed at least one innocent man, and probably many more than that. This goes against one of the principles of our justice system, which is that it's better to let 100 guilty men go free than punish one innocent man. So this is introducing this viewpoint, and we're focusing on one specific source, this Dr. James Rumond. We introduce him by giving his ethos, his credibility. He's got a PhD in criminology. He's the author of this book about the death penalty. And so we start by introducing who he is and then introducing his viewpoints and giving a quote. Here's what he said. And so after giving that first paragraph of information, we're going to give one more paragraph about him. Dr. Rumond also explains that America is the only first world nation that still executes its citizens for crimes, and his view is that this is, quote, a barbaric and unnecessary form of punishment. Dr. Rumond also believes there is no excuse for executing innocent people in our modern age of forensic science. He argues that, quote, if there isn't sufficient evidence to prove a person's guilt, then if that person is found guilty, he must be given a life must be given a sentence of life in prison. This sentence still punishes a guilty man, but allows an innocent man the rest of his life to prove that he is innocent by means of CSI-type technology. Dr. Rahman believes that this is the only option that is truly fair and just, especially for a country like America that prides itself on promoting and supporting values such as justice and equality. So again, this critical conversation viewpoint, this is the first one. So this is the only one you have to have for this paper, and this is the first one we're introducing. And all you have to do is choose one particular viewpoint within your topic and find a source that represents that viewpoint and give some information about that viewpoint. So we've picked Dr. James Rahman. We're talking about what he thinks about the death penalty and why, and giving a couple of quotes from him. With each one, we've cited it correctly, and we'll talk more about quoting later on, like I think next week. And so we've got our page numbers. We're always saying where the source is coming from, that it's Rahman. Here we're introducing him, and then the page number. We're using signal phrases like argues and explains. So after you're summarizing your critical viewpoint, then you can go to your works cited. So for your works cited, you just want to put all of the sources that you use for this essay in alphabetical order on that last page. So, and again, we'll talk more about works cited next week too. But here we've got that we used an encyclopedia article, we used a documentary, we used an article off the database, and we used a book. So we've got all our information all our sources that we used, both for our pathos-based story that we told because it was a real story. That's where the documentary comes in. And then the background information, which all came from this encyclopedia article. And then when we talk about why it's still a problem, that came from this particular database article. And then our viewpoint that we analyzed was all this James Rahman. All right, so that's the sample paper. Just like always, you can use these things that are highlighted to help you format your information. And you can kind of model your thesis after this. Obviously, you'll have a different thesis statement, but you can use this as a basic model. And these are you can model your transitions between paragraphs after these that are highlighted. So use this as a model and let me know if you have any questions. All right, so that is the end of our discussion about background information and pathos-based introductions.